So with the Ten Commandments, the first one is, you shall have no other gods before me. Sometimes we might think of that as kind of God is being selfish, or he's an egomaniac, and that he can't stand if we're worshiping something else. But there's a lot more to it than that. Number one, it's a gift. So the Ten Commandments, you can think of them as gifts. So the first one is the gift of God himself. And so for God to give himself, we have to focus on him and not somebody else. Secondly, if money is your God, you're going to ignore the other commandments like don't steal or don't murder. So by worshiping God, you're focusing on the giver of the other commandments, like don't steal, don't murder, don't lie. And finally, God deserves our worship, and he's the best thing there is. The Westminster Catechism says the chief purpose of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Our highest enjoyment is when we're in communion with the Lord. So it's really an act of love that God commands us to worship him. The best thing in the world is God himself. The mountains are spectacular, but the one who made the mountains is even more spectacular. So by not worshiping God, you're really missing out. And by giving us the commandment of, worship me alone, God is giving the gift of himself. And you can also think of the Ten Commandments as a pattern for life. Imagine an artist who's painting a picture, and they're painting a picture of a landscape. They're going to have to look at that landscape to paint an accurate picture. And we want to live a life that's just and upright and good and moral and beautiful. And so the way to do that is focus on what is the highest good, what is the epitome of justice, what is the most beautiful, and that's God himself. So by worshiping God, it allows you to live a life of true good, of true beauty, of true justice. And that's all found in who God is. So the commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, it's not because God's an egomaniac. It's really because he's the good God who wants to give us the gift of himself and wants us to live a life that's truly good and truly just and truly righteous. And so by focusing on God, that we have a template we have a picture of what true goodness and beauty and justice looks like. And we tend to become what we worship. We see this in the Bible. People who worship idols that don't see or speak or hear, they become spiritually deaf and spiritually blind. You see in Romans 2, people worship animals, and in the next verse they're acting like animals. Or Israel, they worship the golden calf, and then later on it talks about how they're stiff-necked and they're wayward. Those are words that are used of cattle. Cattle are stiff-necked. Cattle meander off the path. So they worship a cow, and then they started to act like cows. So we become what we worship. So by worshiping God, we become truly just and good and righteous when he becomes our focus and we partake of what he has to offer in Christ.